Every scientist, no matter what they're studying, relies on a fundamental toolkit to make sense of the world around them. Today, we're going to open up that toolkit and see exactly how they get from a simple question to a precise, universally understood answer.
So let's just dive right in with a question. Think about this statement. Iron is denser than aluminum. Is that a fact based on hard numbers, or is it more of a general observation? Keep that thought in the back of your mind, because the answer really gets to the heart of how all science begins.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the scientific blueprint, then look at the universal toolkit scientists use. From there, we'll get into the actual craft of measurement, and we'll wrap up with the language of precision.
First up, the blueprint. This is the basic framework, the game plan that guides a scientist's journey from just being curious about something to actually finding a conclusion.
Every single investigation starts with an observation, and it turns out there are two main flavors. You've got quantitative observations, which are all about numbers and measurements, like a reaction taking exactly 2.3 seconds. And then you have qualitative observations, which are descriptive, things you notice with your senses. So let's circle back to our opening question. The statement, iron is denser than aluminum, is a perfect example of a qualitative observation. It's describing a quality, not spitting out a specific number.
Now, what I think is really cool here is the emphasis on flexibility. A lot of people think the scientific method is this super strict, rigid recipe. It's not. It's actually a logical and systematic approach, yeah, but it's an adaptable one for solving problems.
And while that path can definitely bend and twist, it generally follows this kind of logical flow. You observe something and ask a question. Then you form a hypothesis, which is really just a testable explanation. After that, you design an experiment to see if you're right. And finally, you analyze your results to draw a conclusion.
Okay, let's make this real. This experiment with onion plants is a perfect example of the process in action. The goal is simple: figure out how caffeine affects cell growth. So, how do you even set that up to get a clear, trustworthy answer?
Well, the key is you have to isolate the one thing you're actually testing. The independent variable is the one you change on purpose, in this case, how much caffeine you give the plants. The dependent variable is what you measure to see if there's an effect. That would be the cell growth. Everything else, the temperature, the water, the light, those are your controls. You have to keep them exactly the same so they don't mess up your results.
Okay, so we've got the plan down. Now let's talk about the tools. How can a scientist in Japan understand the work of a scientist in Brazil? They need to be speaking the same language.
And this is the crucial part. Science absolutely needs a standard. Imagine the chaos if one person was measuring in feet and another in meters. It would be a mess. That's why we have the International System of Units, or SI. It's the universal language of scientific measurement.
And this table shows some of the fundamental building blocks of that system. For mass, the whole world agrees on the kilogram. For time, it's the second. For temperature, it's Kelvin. And for length, the meter. Pretty much all other measurements are built on these core units.
But what about when you're measuring something super small or incredibly large? Well, that's where prefixes come in handy. They let you scale these units up or down. So milli means 1,000th, centi means 100th, and kilo means 1,000. Simple, right?
All right, so having the right tools is one thing, but using them with real skill, that's a whole other ballgame. This next part is all about the craft of taking a good measurement.
And this brings us to two words that people mix up all the time: accuracy and precision. Accuracy is all about hitting the target, how close you are to the true, correct value. Precision, on the other hand, is about consistency. It's how close your measurements are to each other, even if all of them are way off the target.
This little scenario here is the perfect way to see if we get the difference. So a student measures the density of aluminum 3 times. The 3 results are all different from each other, but when they average them, the result is the perfect accepted value.
So what's the verdict? Are they accurate, precise, or both? Well, the results are definitely accurate because on average they hit the bullseye, but they are absolutely not precise because the individual measurements were scattered all over the place. They basically got the right answer through a sloppy method.
Which leads us perfectly into our last section, the language of precision. Once you take a measurement, how do you write it down in a way that tells everyone exactly how good, how precise that measurement really is?
The answer is something called significant figures, or sig figs for short. Think of them as a code. By just looking at the number of digits you write down, another scientist can know exactly how good your measuring tool was. It's a way of being totally honest about the limits of your measurement.
Now, When you start doing math with these measurements, you've got to follow some rules. For multiplication, the big one is this. Your answer can only be as precise as your least precise measurement. You are always limited by your weakest link.
So let's put that rule into action with this problem. We need to find the volume of a rectangular box, and we've got these three measurements for the sides. To get volume, we just multiply them together.
Okay, the first and most critical step is to find our weakest link. Look at the three numbers. The 1.27 has three significant figures, but 1.3 and 2.5 each only have two. That means our least precise measurement, our weakest link, has just two significant figures.
So, keeping that weakest link in mind, after we do the multiplication, how many digits are we actually allowed to write down in our final answer? How do we report it honestly? Your calculator is probably going to spit out 4.1275, but remember the rule. Since our least precise measurement only had 2 sig figs, our answer has to be rounded to 2 sig figs. The scientifically honest answer is 4.1 cubic centimeters. Anything more would be claiming a precision you just don't have.
And there you have it. From starting with a simple observation, to designing a controlled experiment, to speaking the universal language of SI units, and finally reporting your results with scientific honesty using significant figures, you now have the basic blueprint for thinking like a scientist. So the only question left is, what are you going to go out and measure?